Hi everyone, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the books that I read in January. I have given up on officially in the video calling these recent reads because they're not. The video is still going to be titled Recent Reads, but honestly, genuinely, by the time this video goes up, it's not going to be recent reads. So just know that these are some of the books that I read in January. The first book I'm going to be talking about is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. In this book, we follow the crew of a spaceship that is traveling through space in order to create a wormhole to another planet. This is a very soft sci-fi series that is very character-driven and very focused on developing the different planets and worlds in this universe. I reread this book, as I've mentioned already a couple of times here on this channel, because of the Interstellar Book Club. I picked it up as an audiobook and I gave it 5 stars. The first time I read this book, I gave it 4.5 stars because it took me a while to read through it. It took me a while to get into it. So even though I really loved it the first time, I was kind of like, I don't know. I don't think it quite gets to a 5-star. So gave this a 5-star. It's so fantastic. This is my second favorite book in the series so far. I think it is just wonderful. One of the main things that I love about it is the characters. We have a big cast of characters here, but we get to know them all very intimately. And so getting to know them all over again was so much fun, was so good. I was looking through my older review of when I first read this, and I found it so interesting because Rosemary was one of my favorite characters, but on this reread, I wasn't as attached to her. I still loved Dr. Chef. Dr. Chef is the freaking best. He is so sweet, so kind, so loving. I love how much of a caretaker he is of the crew. So Dr. Chef is still wonderful. But I definitely had an appreciation for Ashby in this reread. In my original review, I don't mention him, and when I say my original review, I mean my Goodreads review. I can leave it down below. But yeah, I don't mention Ashby, and I have no idea why, because upon this reread, I was obsessed with him. I just thought he was such an excellent captain for this ship, for this crew. So loved him. And I was especially intrigued all over again by Corbin and Ohan. I had not been as invested in the two of them when I first read the series, but I definitely found a new appreciation for them in this reread. And speaking of Ohan, Ohan is an interesting character because they are used to have this conversation about wellness and health, because Ohan and their species allows this virus to inhabit them, which kills them at a much faster rate. But they allow this to happen because the virus gives them enhanced abilities. So it's this whole conversation of like, how much should you invade in that when they are personally choosing to do that, even though it will kill them eventually. I also love the conversations about parenthood here. I love the contracts that Syssix brings in, because in her species, there's a different process for parenting. So you can lay an egg or multiple eggs, but you do not feel attached or responsible for those eggs because you are not yet in the stage of your life where you are comfortable raising children. And so elders are left to do that, and eventually, if you want, when you become an elder yourself, then you will be open to parenting and being someone's mother or father. So really love that. Again, Becky Chambers is just brilliant. She does amazing work. She makes you question so many of your assumptions about so many different things. So honestly, magnifique, incredible. This also has an element of immigration and citizenship and all of that. So again, Becky Chambers is just brilliant. I'm so happy I reread this series in preparation for the release of the final book. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Paper Valentine by Brenna Yovanov. In this book, we follow Hannah, whose best friend Lillian has recently died, and ever since then, she has been able to see Lillian's ghost. as a string of gruesome murders start happening in her town, she and Lillian begin to investigate in order to find out who the killer is. And what makes this killer unique is that they leave a paper Valentine at the scene of the crime, along with a bunch of like little toys. So yeah, I rated this 4 stars. I'm pretty confident my summary was pretty crappy, but I don't want to give too much away, and since this is more of a mystery book, I wanted to keep it short and sweet in that regard. So again, gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really good. I have to admit that I had a rough start with this book. I was not really vibing with it at the beginning. I started it and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna give this more than 3 stars because it's just odd. It's an odd book, especially the description of the characters. The love interest, questionable description of him, and the protagonist and what her friends wore, also questionable in what universe that would actually happen. Like, you see how this dress here, this cover has, they kind of dress like that on a normal day at a normal school, and I'm like, what are you talking about? So after I overcame those issues and that strangeness, I really enjoyed this. I especially enjoyed the friendship between Hannah and Lillian because it was very complex and very interesting. For starters, Lillian died because she had an eating disorder. And so the relationship now between Hannah and Lillian is very fraught because Hannah both feels like she didn't do enough to help Lillian with her eating disorder, and at the same time blames Lillian for doing this to herself, for not doing enough to combat her eating disorder. And so the conversations here about that, one, can be incredibly triggering. So if eating disorders are a trigger for you, keep that in mind before you pick this up. And then second, it was just interesting because it wasn't trying to portray them as the perfect friends. Lillian was not the perfect friend, even though she had her eating disorder, and Hannah also wasn't a perfect friend. So that's what made this interesting. That's what made this compelling. The other major thing I enjoyed about this book was the love interest. Finney was really sweet and very caring, and he had this like bad boy persona. That what I appreciated that this book did is that it explores how this bad boy persona is often put onto people without actually considering their actual actions. And so even if they have done a couple of questionable things, which in the large scheme of things are not horrible things, the most horrible things are expected of them. And if something horrible happens, they want to place the blame on them, even if they have no proof, even if there's no evidence, they kind of fall back into that mentality. And so I really liked that this book went into that. The main reason why I gave this 4 stars instead of 4.5 stars or 5 stars is because some of the comments made by the characters made me uncomfortable. There were some fatphobic comments, there were some ableist comments, and so I was just a bit uncomfy with some of the language here. And on top of that, the big reveal of who the murderer was could have used more work. It was kind of meh, it was a bit lackluster, so that's kind of why I ended up not rating this more highly. But overall, I still enjoyed it. I would still recommend it, and I am genuinely surprised by how much I enjoyed this reading experience overall. The next book I'm going to be talking about is The Princess Trap by Talia Hibbert. So in this book, we follow Cherry, who meets this man called Ruben, and they almost automatically hit it off. They kind of really get along. They really vibe with each other. And so they go to Cherry's apartment and they're making out, and they're caught by the paparazzi. And that's when Cherry finds out that Ruben is actually a prince. And not only is he a prince, but in order to get the paparazzi off their backs, he says that she is his fiance. And so now she has to pretend to be his fiance in order to maintain this ruse of them being involved in order to avoid further controversy. So I rated this book 4.5 stars. I adored it so much. Talia Hibbert, as you all know, is one of my faves. I find her romance books reliable and steady and always hit the mark for me. So this one was no different. As always, I loved Talia Hibbert's characters. Cherry and Ruben were amazing, fantastic. Honestly, they both brought such iconic energy onto the page. Truly, the two of them were just fabulous. Honestly, couldn't love them more if I tried. So primary reason I loved Ruben is because he had the perfect combination of soft boy and dominant energy. Like, he had moments where I wanted to protect him with my entire life, with my entire being, while at the same time he had these very flirty moments and very, what do I call it? Let's just say it straightforward. One of the kinks in this book is power play. And so Ruben is very straightforward about this and is very clear about asking Cherry for consent. And so in the bedroom, he had this very dominant energy that was just perfect. It was not too much, it was not too little. Loved it, incredible, amazing. But then in his personal life, he was kind of softer and gentler, and sure, he was still a bit flirty and whatnot, but mostly he just was precious. So love that about Ruben. Cherry is just iconic because she just oozes charm. She's so charming. She knows how to wield her beauty like a weapon, and it is just so fun to read, so amazing. I loved it. My sapphic ass was like, oh my god, if this woman was real, I would be in love with her, like, so easily, no questions asked. Would commit my life to her. And yeah, it was primarily because of that, and also because she was not afraid to speak her mind. There was this scene where she literally threatens almost to bludgeon Ruben, and it's just such a fun time. I love her. The primary reason I didn't give this 5 stars is because there was a lot of hot and cold shit going on here. Cherry often got mad at very small things, or constantly was like, I like him, I don't like him, I like him, I don't like him. And that just got annoying for me and just made the pacing strange. I would have preferred for there to have been less moments like that where Cherry would kind of rescind her interest in Ruben, just to make the romance feel more fleshed out. On the other hand though, I did think they had chemistry. I felt like the two of them had very strong chemistry, which is, I think, part of the reason why I found it frustrating when they would consistently have these arguments that felt kind of silly. They weren't always silly, but sometimes they felt that way. But still, as always, I love Talia Hibbert. I will continue to read Talia Hibbert. I am still 100% a stan. So very happy I picked this up. The last book I'm going to be talking about is Dealing in Dreams by Lilian Rivera. I will be reading the summary of this book just to give a clearer picture of what this book is about, because I feel like the couple of times I've mentioned it on this channel before, I have explained it terribly, so I want to give something a little bit more on the nose, I guess. I want to give something a little bit clearer and more focused. 16-year-old Nala leads the fiercest all-girl crew in Mega City. That role brings with it violent throwdowns and access to the hottest bodega clubs. But Nala quickly grows weary of her questionable lifestyle. Her dream is to get off the streets and make a home in the exclusive Mega Towers, in which only a chosen few get to live. To make it to the Mega Towers, Nala must prove her loyalty to the city's benevolent founder and cross the border in a search of the mysterious gang, the Ashy Riders. Led by a reluctant guide, Nala battles crews and her own doubts, but the closer she gets to her goal, the more she loses sight of everything and everyone she cares about. Nala must choose whether or not she's willing to do the unspeakable to get what she wants. Can she discover that home is not where you live, but whom you choose to protect before she loses the family she's created for good? I rated this book 4 stars. Once again, Lilian Rivera delivers a book that is just fantastic and incredibly thematically rich. I definitely think that this book could be useful in classrooms. I think it just it has a perfect combination of being entertaining while also having enough themes that could be explored in the classroom. I didn't read this using that lens. I just read it and automatically thought, yeah, I would love to use this book in a classroom. The primary reason for that is that this book explores, I feel like, something similar to the novel The Power, which obviously is an adult novel that I would not recommend for high school students. But this book is exploring, I believe, something similar. I haven't fully read The Power, but I did read part of it. I know the general premise. And it's about women having power. And in this book, we have that scenario as well, where women are the ones who are in charge. They are the ones who are in control of things. They are the ones who say how things are going to be. And things are essentially flipped. They're not flipped entirely 100% to be the equivalent of now, but only women are in power, but they still have quite a few equivalencies. So essentially, women use violence to domineer and assert their power over others, and they objectify men and think of them as lesser, as less intelligent, as less worthy of being listened to. And queerness is something that is still being navigated and worked through. In some aspects it's allowed, but in other aspects it's not allowed. And so really loved that this delved into that, and how a world dominated by women is not necessarily inherently going to be better. It just means that now women are the ones in charge. So a major element of this novel is Nala beginning to question why she wants to use violence to assert her dominance, why that's so important, and if there are other ways for power to be distributed, if there are other ways for people to live peacefully together. And so because Nala grew up in Megacity, she is very convinced about the ways in which Megacity runs. She thinks that is the best way, and it's the only way to do things appropriately. And so as she starts challenging that, it makes this novel interesting, because of course we have a character having a lot of inner conflict, and it leads to a lot of character development. But I do have to admit that the main reason I didn't rate this higher is because this can get pretty repetitive. Nala repeats the same thinking processes rather frequently, and so at some points it's a little bit like, yeah, I know, you don't have to keep saying the same thing. I know you're questioning things. I know you're confused. I know you still think your way is the best way. Like, let's reel it back. We don't have to say it so much. But overall, I still really enjoyed this. I still thought it was really good. I appreciated the side characters and what they brought to the story. They were unique and really made Nala think and question her own actions. So I loved them. And I also appreciated the uncertain ending of this book. If you are hoping that this book will end with a neat little bow, it doesn't. It kind of has an open ending that is hopeful, but you don't really know what's going to happen. You don't really know if Nala will be able to live the life she wants to live after everything that happens in the novel. So I personally appreciated that. I like the ambiguous ending. I didn't need it to be super straightforward about the happily ever after. So just thought I would point that out. Again, really enjoyed it, so I would highly recommend it. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you would like to follow me on any of my social media, I will have the links to that down below in the description. But for now, see you next time.